So it's 2010 and this guy made this thing and everyone played it. And all of a sudden everyone, including me, wanted to be a real ninja slashing his way through countless waves of juicy fruit. But sadly to this day there are no dojos training fruit ninjas. So it seems like after 14 years it came out, it's up to me to become the world's first real fruit ninja. But how? There has to be a way, something like a simulation, a device perhaps. Wait a minute. Okay, let's start with the basics. So, I open Unity, import VR this and that, make a floor, start to panic because it doesn't work, then realize it's a simple fix and continue onto a player. For testing purposes, we give them a hand and a sword. And that's it. Fortunately, I don't have to extensively test this basic stuff. It worked in a previous video, so I'm sure it works here. Now that the basic stuff is out of our way, let's make some fruit. My plan was to make one prefab which after spawning will change its settings to whatever we want. Those settings include things like models, sounds, points and more. This way we will be able to pull this prefab. What is pulling? Just a fancy word for making objects invisible. And what's special about that? Well, thanks to this technique, his device doesn't go boom instantly when the player does something silly like this. Anyway, I set up the prefab and then it was time to figure out the fruit spawning. To fully capitalize on the VR element of what are we trying to make here, I decided to randomly spawn the fruit in a circle around the player in waves. This way the player won't see all the spawn positions at once and will have to rely on the sound as well as his sight, like a true ninja. Well, hopefully. Look, as long as the player punches something while trying to chop a melon in half, good. I call that immersion. But let's continue. After a couple of amusing attempts, where I at least try to spawn the fruit in the right direction, order and time, I simply decided it was good enough, even though the wave system I created was highly unreliable. Let's say spawning precisely what I wanted wasn't really its problem. For example, right now it was time to spawn an apple. And as you can see, it spawned a bomb. But if you think about it, this adds an extra layer of randomness. Yeah, so let's call it a feature and continue. The next thing I wanted to get working was the satisfying. That means splitting every fruit in half, then making a prefab with particles and writing few lines of code to make it all work. And yes, I could use something like a mesh generation or whatever that fancy stuff is they use in Beat Saber, but it seems kinda too complicated or whatever, so let's stick with a simple method of if collision, delete this and spawn this. Now, does it work? Not what I expected, but certainly looks cool. Okay, let's try this. 1 second. Well, that's better. No, it's not. I swear I only touched one single thing. Why is there so much red? Okay, it's yellow now, but by the looks of it, that's just audio issues. I'll sort it out later, because right now we have a bigger problem, and there is a lack of UI. Since I don't remember how exactly the game works apart from chop fruit, get points, let's take a look at some gameplays. Wait. So this is awkward. That's apparently Fruit Ninja VR. So, what about the UI? Turns out that UI as well as the scoring system are pretty simple. Score goes here, the best score below that, strikes on the side, and if you ignore all the combos, dragon fruit and whatever this is, you get 1 point for each fruit you slash in half. With my complex notes in one hand and mouse in the other, I jumped back into Unity and quickly made a world space canvas, text and freeze-drag images. After I hooked everything up, it seemed to be working, so I put my headset on to test the game. What? The UI was bugged, and I had no idea how to fix it. To me, it seemed like Unity just decided I had it too easy and threw this little brain teaser at me. It took me hours before I figured out that this isn't the same as doing this.
Why are we still here?
Anyway, now that I fixed this strange UI, I realized I better start working on graphics. Because this right now feels like the classic we got the Fruit Ninja VR at home situation. It's time we start blending. So I edited some textures I found on the internet, and after I remade the environment, I slapped those bad boys on the floor and walls. But even though the textures were nice and it generally looked better, it felt a little empty and boring. So I fixed that by adding some appropriate banners and whatever you call these things. Maybe like ribbons or I don't know. Then I made much better looking fruit, some background props, and on top of that, a player's hand and a sword. And then I accidentally deleted the fruit textures. Anyway, once I was done with textures, I imported everything into Unity, quickly baked the lighting, and then jumped into VR to take a look. And don't mind the player's height, it's just a bug that could have been easily prevented. If only I paid more attention to this little fella at the beginning and tested stuff properly. But besides the obvious height issue, everything seemed to be working. So I continued with the beautification of this fine area. I added a new font, made these awesome exits, new menu in case you die or strike out and want to know how you did. And after a couple of attempts, I even made a working exit button. And then after a brief playtest without sound, I had to rearrange the spawn positions, because constantly spinning around and hoping that maybe this time the fruit will spawn right in front of you was a little nauseating. We'll get around making some sounds later. For now though, this arrangement makes me go yes! And that was it for the playable part of the game. Up next, main menu. Here I released what I like to call my inner artistic beast. And as you might see in a second, I overdid it a little. Now, I have no idea if this will run on Quest, since there are so many objects and some displacement and transparent shaders, and that might be a problem, but it looks good, so whatever. Almost every model and texture I either modified or created. Except for that tree that's not mine. Thanks for that,
Jogos.
And yes, I know, right now we don't have anything in the game that screams samurai, but I played a lot of Cyberpunk lately, and it was the only name I came up with that was really close to the original, and I don't think it's close enough for these guys to sue me. That said, please don't, okay? I went back and saw your version of Fruit Ninja VR, and it's countless times better than mine, okay? Like, what is this? You got 2 swords, multiple game modes? You can do that? And what even is this? I can't compete with that. With a lawsuit successfully avoided, hopefully, let's finish our game. So sit tight while I download a bunch of sounds and randomly overlay them until the result is sort of acceptable. And as for the music, this looks cool. And while I'm at it, let me do some cosmetic changes. Okay, all done. Let's see if I can acquire the title of a certified real-life fruit ninja. I must admit, the gameplay footage doesn't really give this game a justice. But luckily for you, the game is probably in the description. It should be available for PC and Quest, and I can guarantee if you play it, you'll become the real certified fruit ninja. Okay, that's it.